Kia ora tātou, no mai haere mai. It's really lovely to see you all here. You're a bit hard to see actually because of the lights, but I wasn't sure how many people would show up. You know, it's been such a jam-packed schedule and it's the last session of the day, so thank you so much for giving me your time. I think this session will be interesting to you in either one of two ways. Either you will sit back and listen to the activities and questions I tend to do with students and you'll think, oh man, I'm doing a way better job than Lila, I've got this sussed, and that'll be really gratifying for you to know that. Or you might get some tips, some ideas, some inspiration about things you might want to change up. So let me start with my pepeha. I whānau mai o ki Ataria, engari I tipu ake aho ki Canada. I forgot to do my thing, so you can look at the photos while I do it. I whānau mai o ki Ataria, engari I tipu ake aho ki Canada. No pongia tōku whānau o Kutupuna, engari kei Belmont, tamaki makoto aho e nohuana. Ko, if the laser works, not working. Ko Marcel, toku hoarangatira. Ko Caden, taku tama. Ko Lila, toku ingoa. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So people usually pick up a bit of an accent when I'm speaking and they ask, so where are you from? And it's kind of a complicated answer, and I think for most of us it's a complicated answer. I grew up, as I said in my pepeha, in Canada. Canada is a giant country. If you know where Ontario and Lake Ontario is, it's kind of central east. I grew up in a place called Mississauga, and I want to acknowledge that for thousands of years, Indigenous peoples cared for the land in Canada and continue to do so. In particular, I want to acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, because that's where I grew up. That photo with the buildings on the right-hand side is a current photo of Mississauga. That's the City Hall and the public library. So on hot summer days when my family would go to the lake, they'd go swimming, and yes, there are hot days in Canada. I wouldn't go with them. I would go to the library because that's who I am. Swimming was not the thing I was into at the time. It's changed now. Every career assessment I've ever done has told me I should have been a librarian. So here I am. I don't know, maybe one day. But right now I live in Aotearoa, and I've actually lived here for more of my adult life than I spent time in Canada, but the accent is still sticking with me. Ethnicity-wise, though, my parents both grew up in Bosnia. They lived there until their late 30s before they moved to Canada. So I am in awe of them for having the courage to move to a country, 4 daughters, no money, no English language, and they did that for us. So huge sacrifice. So the photo at the top left there is of a place called Stari Most, which means Old Bridge. That was built in the 16th century during the Ottoman Empire. It stood for 427 years until it was smashed during the Balkan War in 1993. It's since been rebuilt in a traditional way. So in the traditional ways they used all that time ago, so that's pretty cool. My family, most of my family are still in Canada, my 3 sisters, and they're a bit bitter about me being here, but that's just what happened. In terms of my work history, as Jenny said, I've been to a bunch of different places. I started my working life on the JET program. If any of you did that, it would be nice to reminisce with you. I was in Japan in Tottori-ken for 2 years, surrounded by rice paddies. So that was a really wonderful experience. I then moved to Aotearoa. I did my teaching qualification at the University of Auckland and got a job teaching not English language, but the subject English at Waitakere College in Auckland, and then Mount Roskill Grammar School in Auckland. And at Mount Roskill is where I started to develop an interest in career work, and I did the certificate in career development. Had a child. That's really life-altering. Ended up getting a job at Manukau Institute of Technology, and I was managing the Career Center there for 6 years, so a long time. And I remember being there, and we would have students come in who were enrolled in one thing, but were interested in changing. They'd enrolled in it, but weren't loving it and wanted to change to something else. Or we also saw adult clients who just walked in off the street because they wanted to have a career conversation with someone. And I remember doing some of those sessions and being very much out of my comfort zone and feeling like I wasn't equipped to do justice to those people. And I had my certificate in career development, but I still didn't feel like it was enough, which is why I started doing the master's study at AUT in the brief space of time in which they did it. I think, I'm hoping that they redeveloped that. Dr. Lynette Reed, if any of you studied with her at AUT, supervised most of the papers I did, and I can't say enough good things about her. She's phenomenal as a career practitioner and as a teacher and as a mentor. So I did that, and then I moved on to Depot Art Space, which is on the surface an art gallery. It's also a music studio, but they also have a huge contract with the Ministry of Social Development supporting creative people into employment. So that was an interesting role. And then I moved back into secondary schools at Epsom Girls Grammar School, where I currently work part-time, and then I see adult clients on usually Fridays and Saturdays. So now you know everything about me. Let me move on to the agenda. I know that there are too many of you to do a proper whakawhanaungatanga, but I thought it's so valuable, when you're at a conference, just to connect with one person, if that's all you ever end up doing. So I'm just going to give you a minute to talk to someone close to you about your name. What's your name? Who named you? Do you like your name? What's the meaning behind your name? I'll give you a minute or two while I gather my thoughts. Go for it. I'm so sorry if I'm interrupting you and stopping your conversation. Thank you for doing that. I'm sorry if not everyone got through it. Hopefully you can continue the conversation during happy hour after this. So I also wanted to talk about this Whakatoki, which the first time I came across it, it just really struck me. And I feel like this one, Aki Aki Te o Te Tangata, really encapsulates what I'm hoping all of these activities and questions that I suggest. It's kind of the guiding purpose behind them all. My main aim when I'm talking to someone in a career development session is to nurture their indescribable light, to let students know that they matter and that there's a place for them in the world. So all of these activities, and let me just go to the next slide so you can see what I promised 7, I've given you 8 because one of them isn't strictly an activity, silence and smiles. I think what all of these activities allow you to do is they allow you to create space for meaningful conversations. And that's what we're in the business of doing. And hopefully create space for the student to be doing most of the speaking. So we'll go through them one by one. There will be time at the end for questions if you have questions about any of the specific activities. If you're desperate to ask me one, please go for it during. Although I must warn you, I have very bad hearing, and I am actually meant to wear a hearing aid, but I can't afford one. So please do use the microphone if you have a question, otherwise I won't hear you. Okay, first one, image cards. Sorry, I forget that I'm wearing this. So image cards is just, it can be a super quick activity. It is when you give the student a set of 20, I just have ones that are 20, images. And all of the images on the cards correspond to emotional states, I guess you could call it. They're just photographs. You give them the 20 and ask them to choose 5, which describe how they're currently feeling about their career problem or their career issue. And they choose 5. And when they choose the 5, you then ask them to tell you a little bit about why they chose those 5 cards, right? So in an ideal world, sometimes they're able to describe why they chose those 5 cards. A lot of the times, young people have a hard time articulating why they might have chosen those 5 cards. If you, as the practitioner, are sitting there and you're seeing that they've chosen the exploding building, the scary-looking roller coaster, and the bundle of wires, and you're making an assumption about how they're feeling, please don't tell them that interpretation. Just park that to the side for a second. And I read this on a blog once, and I can't remember who it was, and I'm really upset about it. I've tried to reference, these are not my original ideas, obviously. Sorry if I didn't say that before. They're all just activities that I've gotten from research articles, other practitioners, books, etc. I've done my best to reference everything on the last slide. What I was going to say about this person on the blog that I read, he compared this activity to, he compared Sherlock Holmes versus Columbo, if you're familiar with either one of those fictional detectives. Columbo's very much, that's who did it and this is why. Whereas Columbo is a bit of a bumbling, I'm not sure, could it be, goes in a kind of roundabout way to find the who did it. So don't be afraid with this activity, and I would say in any career development session, to play the bumbling fool. For some of us, that's our natural style. I include myself in that one, because you want to be tentative. You don't want to put your interpretation on however the student is feeling. So you might say something like, I'm not sure, but possibly there might be a connection between these two cards. Do you feel that they're similar in some way? So again, asking the student to speak about it instead of, declaring, well, clearly you must be feeling anxious. Because they may not perceive it that way. We don't know until we ask them. So that's just a nice little thing that you can do to sort of gauge where they're at emotionally. And another way you can use image cards is you could, instead of thinking about the present moment, you could ask them to choose 5 cards that represent how they would like their preferred future to look. So that's another nice conversational starting point. I think that's all I have to say about that one. It doesn't have to take very long. Civicus' CSI. So this one does take a long time. But I think it's super worthwhile, especially for students who just have nothing, like they're not giving you anything, and none of the usual questions that you ask are getting anywhere with them. So Mark Civicus, super famous career practitioner, wrote this book. CSI stands for Career Style Interview. I would highly recommend reading the book, because all the CSI is 5 questions that you ask in a certain order. But he's written a whole book about why you ask those questions and what kind of information you can get from those questions and why you ask them in the order in which they're asked and why you then repeat it back to the student in a particular way. So super detailed, super dense, like full on to read, but well worth your effort. So I'll go through each of the 5 questions. When I first encountered them, I thought, what's that gonna tell me? I underestimated them. I was 100% wrong, 100% wrong, as I often am. So here are the 5 questions. I'll tell you a little bit about why you're meant to ask each question. So for this one, you're asking the student to talk about people that are not their parents, people that they admired when they were growing up, maybe so much so that they even pretended during play that they were that person. I know that a lot of young people may not have fantastically positive role models in their lives at a young age. That's okay. It can be a cartoon character. It can be a singer, it can be a sports player, it can be someone famous. It doesn't have to be someone who is physically present in their lives, it's just a person. And you ask them to describe that role model. And as they are describing them, you, as the practitioner, I usually end up writing down the adjectives that they're using to describe those people. So it might be words like brave, or it might be, who do I get a lot of? They pick all sorts of people. I've had people choose Britney Spears, Hannah Montana, because I work at a girls' school. Things like that. So their qualities are don't care what other people think, confident. That's how they're describing them. So why are you asking this question? You're asking this question, Civicus argues, because when they're describing those people, those role models, what they're actually describing is the parts of themselves that they want to further develop. They may already have those personal qualities. They may not. They may want to be further developing those qualities. The adjectives in this answer provide the blueprint for how this student needs to be in the world in order to get to the place they want to go. So it might be that they need to develop their bravery. It might be that they need to develop their confidence, and so on. So isn't that kind of weird that it's just like one little question and you think, what's that going to give me? But actually, it gives you really, really cool information. The second one is this one. Another unassuming question. You wouldn't on surface think it's career related. Civicus argues it is. Civicus argues that no matter what we're doing, even when we think we're relaxing, we're still doing things that matter to us. We're still doing things that we find interesting. So when we are watching a favorite show, a favorite YouTuber, we're immersing ourselves in a preferred setting, right? And so you can then translate that into a career setting. So if you have a student who is watching a lot of home improvement shows, it could be that their kind of preferred setting is a kind of, realistic manual building kind of thing, or it might be more of a creative, aesthetic, interior design kind of thing, Or it might be because they're most interested at the end to see how much the house sells for, and they're interested in that kind of entrepreneurial aspect of it. And so immediately now, I'm asking two questions. You're giving direction to the student, or the student is giving direction to themselves about who they are, like what their top qualities are, and potential settings that would give them enjoyment and motivation. This is the next one, third one. So for this one, Savickas argues that this is the script that they need to enact in order to proceed with their current career scenario. And I think I can only explain this with an example. So a student I was working with said that her favorite current story was Harry Potter, the last one in the series. You then, even though you may know the story of Harry Potter, you ask them to describe the story in their own words. And again, what you're doing as the practitioner is I need to write things down, otherwise I forget them. I'm writing down the words that they're using to describe the story. So the words that this student used were things like, main purpose is to defeat the bad guys, preparing for a battle. Harry Potter is 17. He successfully kills the bad guy. These are all student words. At the end of the novel, we see Harry is fine. So how is that related? Why is she talking about that story at this point in her life? You can once again relate it to her career situation. Just like Harry Potter, she's 17. Just like Harry Potter, she's about to embark on this battle. Just like Harry Potter, she has to find the parts within herself to find the strength to overcome the bad guy. And the bad guy obviously can be a real person. Often it's the parent, unfortunately. Or sometimes it's not a real person, but a self-concept, a lack of a worry, an anxiety, and so on. Favorite saying or motto Savickas says is the best advice the student has for themselves right now. And once they say the motto, sometimes it takes quite a bit of nudging to get them to come up with the motto. If they've never heard one that they like, you can ask them to make one up on the spot, or ask them, what encouraging thing a friend has ever said to them, or a loving member of their family. So in the past, students have said things like their mottos are, you only live once, or they've said it YOLO, take a chance, everything's going to be okay, things like that. And that is the best advice they have for themselves in that moment. That's the advice they need to hear in that moment. So you as the practitioner would obviously repeat that back, and then also ask them, how can you apply that advice to your current career scenario? And it might be, okay, well, I might have to relax a bit more. I might have to have a chat to someone about something. And then the last one in the CSI is this one. I was very afraid to use this one when I first started experimenting with the CSI, because I was terrified that they would, in that moment, suddenly have this, realization of some traumatic event that happened to them when they were young. So I was really afraid to use it. And I spoke to a supervisor about it once, and she said, well, what would you do? Let's say that happened. Worst case scenario, they suddenly realized that something horrific happened to them when they were 4 years old. What are you going to do? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, actually, I'm really lucky. The counselors in our school are very close by. I could take them immediately and refer them to a counselor who was equipped to deal with trauma. So as soon as I knew that I had that plan, then I was able to start asking this question. So why are you asking this question? Savickas argues that early memories indicate a preoccupation with a problem, possibly even the problem the person wants to solve above all others. Early memories reveal a central tension in a person's life. I'll give you an example to show you what I mean. I asked a student what one of her earliest memories was, and she described being 3 or 4, jumping around on trampoline, having the time of her life, and because trampolines are often death traps, really, she got stuck in it. And her father had to pull her arm to get her out of the trampoline and ended up spraining her arm. So that's the memory that she had. You, as the practitioner, are listening in this question, in particular for the verbs that the student is saying. So she used stuck, pulled, and sprained. Interestingly, because memories are not reliable, right? We remember certain things at certain times. From her current career situation, this was a student who was originally from Christchurch and had been pulled out of Christchurch against her will to move to Auckland by her father. She wasn't happy there, and she was stuck. So there was no point in me talking about, well, you could do such and such course in Auckland, because there's no way she was staying in Auckland. She was desperate to go back to Christchurch, which is what she did. So yeah, I feel like CSI, unassuming 5 questions, but actually a lot of deep stuff that can happen underneath. All right, next one is active listening. Do any of you recognize her? No? It's probably better that you don't. She's a clinical psychologist, Dr. Orna, I think, Gralnick. She is on a show, I think it's on 3 now, Couples Therapy. Don't watch it. You know, you might have to have a lie down after watching one of the episodes. They're pretty full-on marriage counseling. I know we're not clinical psychologists. I know we're not counselors. But what I do know 100% is that we absolutely need to have active listening skills, and that's why I admire her so much, because she's so good at it. She's so intense about it. So I know it's late in the day, but that's all right. I'm still going to get you to do this activity. I'm going to read you the rules first, and then I'll explain the activity because I like the rules. So the rule is number 1, no interrupting when the person is speaking. And rule number 2 is when you're the person speaking, make sure that you speak for at least 2 minutes, because a lot of us are a bit, reticent. We don't like to talk too much, but you need to give the other person time to listen, because that's the point of the activity. So those are the rules. When I put up the activity, just go ahead and get started. It'll take, 8 to 10 minutes or something. So ideally, groups of 3. Some of you might have to get up and move. So just go for it. This is what you're talking about, as long as you're following the rules. I think that might be 10 minutes. Once again, so sorry to interrupt you if you were in the middle of something really valuable. You don't have to verbalize this, but I just want to invite you to think about, as you were speaking and not being interrupted, how did you feel? And as you were listening, how did you feel? Active listening, the more you pay attention to it and the more people you speak with, the more people you realize how they're not very good at it. And it's I feel like when I know I'm being listened to, it's like a balm on a wound. Like I feel so well looked after when someone is giving me their full listening. You feel the energy of it. So ask yourself, and this is just for your mind only, whether or not you were doing any of these things as you were listening. I'm just going to pop them up one by one, and you can read through them. So for me, it would be tick, tick, tick to all of them. I definitely do all of those things. And that's why I just wanted to put active listening as one of the activities on our list of things to do in a session, because it's hard. It's hard to do it well, but so valuable to do it well. So next activity, the next few won't take very long. I wanted to start with the less common ones. I'm assuming CSI and image cards weren't that common. I could be wrong. So let's move on. I don't know how common this one is, and at the end will be kind of the more common ones. So this one is less physical than it sounds. It's not a yoga move. 2 and 3 chair resolution of splits is more like a drama activity, and it's really good. It can be, again, quick. I'm thinking about people who are limited in their time. You have a student who comes in, can't decide. Often they're stuck between 2 choices that they want to make a decision about. With this activity, you get 2 chairs. It can be 3. I'll explain the third. 2 equal, identical chairs. And you assign, let's say I had a student once who was trying to decide between doing a Bachelor of Engineering or a Bachelor of Design. So you get the student to sit in one chair, and that chair is the Bachelor of Engineering chair. So let's say the student's name is Anna, so that's Engineering Anna, and she sits in that chair, and she tells the empty chair, which is Design Anna, all the reasons she should do engineering, all of the good points about it, all of the reasons why she's interested in it. So she does that. Then she physically gets up off of that chair, sits in the other chair, the Design Anna chair, and explains all the reasons why she should do design. And Design Anna has a chance to do a bit of a rebuttal, explain all the reasons why she shouldn't actually do engineering, and so on and so forth. And they switch back and forth. It doesn't, often it's, 2 or 3 switches and that's it, and that's all they feel comfortable doing. And that's fine. And at the end, you just ask, because it's quite relaxing, all the things I'm asking you to do, because a lot of the time you're just sitting back. So anyway, afterwards, you just ask them, so which one felt like top dog and which one felt like underdog? And usually they're able to see which one was a little bit more dominating by doing that exercise. The third chair comes in if there is someone else, maybe not physically in the room, but in their life, who it has a big impact on the decision, and they can talk to that empty chair as well and express themselves in that way. So that's that one. Doesn't take anything except 2 chairs. Hopefully we're all well-resourced enough to be able to have some chairs in our space. Walking the problem exercise, you can do this one outside or inside. All you need is 2 sides of a room. So it's a nice way to introduce some physicality, again, instead of sitting around all the time. So you get the student to go to one side of the room, and on that side of the room, they're in the problem situation. They're undecided about what they're going to do, and they're looking ahead to that side of the room, to all of the things that are possible. And you get that problem self to describe how nice it would be if they could be over there. And then this is if you've heard of the miracle question, it's just a variation on the miracle question. So then you say to them, okay, a miracle has happened. Don't question the miracle. Just walk over to the other room. It's happened. Whatever you were dreaming of has happened. You get them to walk over to the other side of the room and then talk back to their old previous self and give them some advice, some tips about how to move forward. What steps do they need to take to get here? How does it feel here? You, as the other person in the room, can assume the role of the kind of hesitant self and be encouraged to move forward. Again, you're just getting them to say things to themselves. You're getting to build themselves up. And it's a lifelong skill that they can practice. So this is one of the more common ones, back to John Holland and Rysik codes. This is just an easy way of doing it where you have an inventory table. It's organized vertically by code, and you just give them a little stamp because stamps are fun, and they can stamp the activities. All those, the only thing in those squares, I know it's unreadable, are activities that are associated with that Rise It code. And I certainly wouldn't do this in isolation. This is in no way valid or scientific, but it's just a kind of tiny little indication of areas of interest. I would always do this in combination with another kind of Holland code activity, which could be a card sort like this one, where you again print off the cards and get them to choose 2 or 3 which they feel most closely relate to them. I know that's very female-focused because I work in an all-girls school, but there's another version with more male images. So that's an easy one. The reason I put in the agenda for activities, I put Rise It 2 or 3 ways, and I know I've only shown you 2. A third way is another card sort. This one is very focused on just words. Another way to do it is to focus on the types of school assessments that they enjoy doing, like whether it's fact-based or opinion-based. You could do another card sort around that. And then a super common one, but I really love, and I feel like you can do this with quite young students. It's just a lovely good old values card sort where you get them to look through all the different values associated with their future working lives. And I usually get them to put them in 3 piles. Very important, somewhat important, or not so important. And then you get them to explain to you why they've chosen the top 10 that they've chosen. And again, you are listening, and you're getting them to be doing most of the talking. So the last activity on the agenda, which I don't have a slide for, is Silence and Smiles, which I just love. Someone mentioned in the well-being session this morning that she finds herself, she used to be, sorry if you're here, I don't remember who it was, but there was someone from the audience who said that she used to be the kind of person who fills in the gaps whenever there's a silence in a conversation. And she's moved, thank you, she's waving. Great, cool. And I loved that comment because she was saying how silence, she's trying to do more of it. I was in a workshop yesterday, and it's funny if there's a bit of silence, sometimes people need a lot of silence in order to have the space to say something. Yeah. And I suspect there are more introverts in this room than extroverts. I don't know. I feel like we're often at the mercy of the extroverts who are interrupting and, talking a lot. So much spaciousness and silence. That's why it's nice to go outside as well. If you hate your office, maybe pop outside. I'm not going to read these. These are the questions now. These are just 10 questions that you can potentially ask. I find them useful. I'll just go through them. Sorry, I can't help myself. The first one is another Civicus question. How can I be useful? And he argues that you shouldn't say, how can I help you today? Because then you're putting the person you're assuming the person needs help. They may not need help. They may just want something else. So how can I be useful to you today? Puts you in a still a useful position, but isn't kind of, making assumptions. So first set of 5. I think you're getting these slides. Did you not finish reading the last bit? Should I go back? Okay, I'm clicking. You know, chaos theory of careers. Jim Bright would say that one of our main priorities is to get people comfortable with uncertainty, which is why I ask that question a lot. None of us have any idea what's going to happen. It doesn't have to be bad. We always assume it's going to be bad. It may very well be incredible. I love that one. What would you say to a friend who is feeling this way? If you are ever giving yourself a hard time, ask yourself that question. And then that last one, again, you know, if you're reflecting back to the student things that they've said, make sure you ask them, what did I get wrong? To give them space to correct anything. The last thing on the agenda was a quick bit about your career space. And I know that we all have different spaces, and these are just gentle suggestions. Do the best you can with the space you have. Yeah. Try and have identical chairs. You know, if you're on this fancy ergonomic chair and the student is on some, you know, uncomfortable little stool that's lower than your, it's not good. Don't do it. Desk items, as someone again was speaking about earlier, might have been the same person who talked about the silence when the students come in and you know that they're agitated, their hands are shaking or whatever. Just have something on the desk for them to fiddle with. If you don't have a designated office space, you might have to carry it around in your little mobile career space. Fidget toys, mindfulness jars. That's my mindfulness jar. Google it. It's really easy and cheap to make. Mini Zen gardens, stones, painted rocks, lots of things you could have on your little desk. I already talked about this. Consider taking it outside, so much more beautiful. When you go back into your career space, have a look at your walls and with fresh eyes, what are they saying? I'd highly recommend reading through Anne Milne's Audit of White Spaces. It's a free resource that she provides on her website, and it's a way for schools and you, because you can do it just from your own space, to look at it through the lens of Māori and Pacific students to see how welcoming is this space, and is it a tokenistic welcoming or is it a genuine welcoming? Craig spoke about this at the AGM. Just have a think to yourself about the connotations of the word advisor and how comfortable you are with using that term. Similarly, if you use the term interview, have a think about that. I think it says 46 seconds left for questions. I'm so sorry. Does anybody have any questions? Please use the mic if you do, because I really won't be able to hear you if you don't. Have I lulled you to sleep? Yep. I really won't be able to hear you unless you go to the mic. I'm sorry. Sorry. Maybe if you yell really loudly. Kia ora.
When you had your slides up at the start about your career journey, what do you prefer, working in the tertiary space or the secondary space?
Oh, I've worked in tertiary, secondary, and like with adults in private clients. My favorite is definitely the secondary because they're full of hope. Like usually when clients come to see me, they're unhappy in their current role or looking to make a move or regretting the thing that they did or having some horrific work situation. So it's lovely to work with young people. Yeah.
And just reading your bio around kindness,
Ah, yeah.
that really speaks volumes to me. I think that's cute.
Yeah, totally. Thanks. Okay, I think that time's up. 0-0. I thought that was well timed.
Lila,
Oh,
thank
wow.
you so much.
Ah, thank you
This
for
was
having me.
just